In a village called Umuobi, surrounded by thick forests and a wide river, lived a young girl named Adiza. Adiza was known for her beauty, kindness, and the way she helped everyone around her. She had big, bright eyes that sparkled like the morning sun, and a smile that could melt even the hardest hearts. Her family was poor, and she lived with her father, mother, and 2 younger brothers in a small mud house with a thatched roof. Every day, Adiza would go to the river to fetch water for her family. She loved the cool feeling of the river on her feet and the sound of the water flowing peacefully. The river was called Omaliko, and the villagers believed it was the home of a powerful river god named Chijioke. One day, while Adiza was fetching water from the river, she heard a soft voice calling her name. Adiza. Adiza. She looked around but saw no one. The voice was gentle, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. She felt a shiver run down her spine, but she shook her head and continued filling her clay pot. The voice called again, Adiza, do not be afraid. This time the water in the river began to glow, and a figure emerged from it. It was a tall man with skin that shimmered like the surface of the water and eyes that sparkled like stars. He wore a robe made of flowing water, and his hair was as dark as the night sky. Adiza stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. I am Chijioke, the river god, the figure said in a deep, soothing voice. I have watched you for many years, Adiza. Your kindness and beauty have touched my heart. Adiza was afraid, but she also felt a strange warmth spreading through her body. She wanted to run, but her feet felt glued to the ground. Why do you call me great river god? She asked, her voice trembling. Chijioke smiled gently. I have chosen you to be the mother of my child, he replied. Adiza's eyes widened in shock. But I am just a girl, she protested. How can I bear a child for a god? Chijioke's expression grew serious. You are special, Adiza. The child will be a bridge between our worlds, but do not fear. I will guide you. That night, Adiza could not sleep. She tossed and turned on her bamboo mat, her mind filled with the river god's words. She knew it was an honor to be chosen by a god, but she also felt scared and confused. What would her parents think? What would the villagers say? The next morning, she decided to tell her mother, Naoma. Mama, she began hesitantly. I met the river god yesterday, and he said he wants me to have his child. Her mother's eyes widened with disbelief. Adiza, are you sure of what you are saying? The river god does not just speak to anyone. Naoma replied, her voice filled with concern. When Adiza's father, Okiki, heard the news, he was furious. This is nonsense, he shouted. The river god has never spoken to anyone in this village for generations. You must have imagined it. But deep inside, Adiza knew it was not her imagination. As the days passed, she began to feel strange. She felt a new life growing inside her, a feeling both magical and frightening. Her belly started to swell, and the villagers began to notice. They whispered behind her back and pointed fingers. Look at Adiza, carrying a child with no father, they said. What a shameful thing, others murmured. She must have angered the river god. Adiza felt lonely and ashamed, but she held her head high. She believed in the river god's words, but every night she would cry quietly, wondering if she had made the right decision. One day, an elder named Nadi, who was known for his wisdom, approached Adiza. My child, he said kindly, the river god does not choose just anyone. There must be a reason. Do not let the villagers' words trouble you. Stay strong and the truth will reveal itself. Months passed and Adiza's belly grew bigger. The villagers continued to mock her, and her family was shunned. Okiki stopped going to the village square out of shame, and Neoma wept quietly at night. Adiza felt the weight of their pain and her own doubts growing heavier each day. Then one night a terrible storm came to the village. The winds howled and the rain poured like never before. Thunder roared and lightning flashed across the sky. The river Omaliko rose and flooded its banks, threatening to swallow the village whole. As the villagers gathered in fear, Adiza stood by the river, her clothes drenched, her hair sticking to her face. She felt the river god's presence and heard his voice above the storm. "Adiza," he called, "come to me." With trembling legs, she walked towards the water, her heart pounding with fear and hope. The villagers watched in horror and amazement. "What is she doing?" they cried. "She will be swept away." But as Adiza reached the edge of the river, the waters parted. Chijioke appeared again, his face calm and his eyes filled with kindness. "Do not be afraid," he said. "Tonight the truth will be revealed." Suddenly, the storm stopped. The villagers were silent, their mouths agape, as they watched the river god gently place his hand on Adiza's belly. A bright light surrounded them, and Adiza felt a warmth she had never known. She knew at that moment that everything was about to change. In that glowing light, Adiza felt her fear melt away. The river god spoke to the villagers. "Listen to me, people of Umuobi," Chijioke began, his voice calm but powerful. "I have chosen Adiza for a reason. Her child will bring great blessings to this village, but only if you open your hearts and welcome her with love and respect." The villagers, who had been whispering in fear and doubt, now stared in awe. The elders, who had once dismissed Adiza's story as foolishness, bowed their heads in shame. Then a woman named Oluchi, known for her sharp tongue and loud voice, stepped forward. "But why should we believe you?" she challenged. "We have seen no proof, only a girl with a swollen belly." Chijioke's eyes narrowed slightly, but he remained calm. "You doubt what you do not understand, Oluchi," he replied. "But doubt will not change the truth. Adiza carries a child who will bring harmony between our worlds. You must accept her, or suffer the consequences of your disbelief." Suddenly, a strong wind blew across the village, and the river roared again. The people gasped, clinging to each other in fear. "Stop! We believe you!" shouted Nanadi, the wise elder. "We have seen enough. Let the girl and her child bring the blessings you speak of." Chijioke smiled and nodded, and the river instantly calmed. Adiza felt the baby move inside her, and she knew her child would soon come into the world. Over the next few months, the villagers began to change their attitudes. They brought gifts to Adiza and her family, seeking forgiveness and favor from the river god. Okiki, who had once been angry and ashamed, now felt a sense of pride. He watched his daughter with new respect, and Neoma, her mother, held her close every night, whispering words of encouragement. Adiza still had moments of fear and doubt, but she felt stronger knowing that the river god was watching over her. One day, as she sat by the river, she heard Chijioke's voice again. "Adiza," he called softly, "the time is near. Be brave, my child." Adiza nodded, her heart steady. She knew she had to be strong, not just for herself, but for her child and her village. She closed her eyes, feeling the river's gentle waves lap against her feet, and whispered, "I am ready." The day of her child's birth came with a bright, clear sky. The whole village gathered around Adiza's home, waiting in anticipation. Neoma and the village midwives were by her side, and Okiki stood outside, his heart filled with hope and fear. As the first cry of the baby rang out, a golden light shone from the sky. The villagers gasped, and the river Omaliko flowed with a new, vibrant energy. The river god's voice echoed, "Rejoice, for the child has come." Adiza held her newborn son, feeling a surge of love like never before. She looked into his eyes, which sparkled like the river, and knew that he was destined for something greater than anyone could imagine. And from that day on, the village of Umobi thrived with new prosperity. The crops grew taller, the fish in the river multiplied, and the people lived in harmony.